Hey folks, this week is lab number 10, and we're going to do another recursion example this week, and this will hopefully help you guys with the lab and the assignment. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an array of numbers, and this is an example array. It's got a 2 and then a 3 and then a 6 and an 8, 20, 30, and 50. So it's an array of integers. It looks like it's got 7 numbers in there, and they're in cells 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as you would expect. And what I want is I want to create a method which recursively adds all of the numbers together that are in an array of any size that's passed into it. So I'm going to do this again in Replit this week, just because. And so let me go find my Replit window. There we go. And so I'm going to start off and I'm going to create a new Replit. And I'm going to say C#. And we're going to begin by creating that array. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to say int. This is going to be called my array, and it's going to be a new int. And I'm going to directly create the array. You can do that by putting curly braces at the end. It had 2, 3, 6, 8, 20, 30, and 50 in there. And so that generates for me an array with those numbers in it. All right, and then eventually we're going to make a call to SumArray, which is the method I'm going to write that's going to be recursive. And we're going to pass it in the array that we have. And it's hopefully going to return to me an answer, which I'm then just going to print out. And so we should have plus answer here. All right, so up at the top here, I'm going to make, I don't know why I typed an O there. I'm going to create a new method, public static int SumArray, which takes in an integer array called the array, and eventually returns an integer of some form. So right now, it's always going to return 1 no matter what. I'm just going to run it to make sure I didn't do something stupid in the header. And then we're going to start talking through how we're actually going to go about doing this recursively. So you'll remember that there are always going to be 3 things that you have to find. You have to find the base condition, you have to find the recursive call, and then if you're doing some kind of math, which is what we're doing here, you have to figure out how that math is going to take effect. All right, so let's talk about the base condition. So any array can be passed in here. I could be passed an array with 1,000,000 cells, an array with 2 cells, an array with 0 cells, an array with 5 cells. The question is, which of those would I know the definitive answer for the sum of all the numbers in the array? So if you give me an array with 1,000,000 cells, there's no immediate way I can tell you what the answer is. That's actually what we're trying to figure out. But if I give you an array that has no cells in it, then I think you can see that it's actually relatively easy to figure out what the sum is. So that's going to be our base condition. So if the array got size, if you're looking for the size of an array, it's .length with a capital L. Sorry, I always have to look that up. Because it's different when it's a list versus an array, and it's different in Java and C#, and that's all very confusing. So if the length of the array is 0, then we know that the sum is 0. So that's my base condition. Give me an array with nothing in it, you get an answer of 0. All right, in all other cases, we're going to need some kind of a recursive call. So a recursive call is going to return some array, and I'm going to have to pass myself some kind of an array in there. All right, so now we're to the point of trying to figure out, well, what's that array going to look like? So the second rule of recursion, the first rule being find yourself a base condition, the second rule of recursion is that each time you call yourself, you must pass yourself something that is getting closer to your base condition. In my case, the base condition is that I'm passed an array with 0 cells in it. So one step bigger than that is an array that has 1 cell. And when I make a recursive call, I need to pass myself an array with 0 cells. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's talk about this array over here for a moment. If I want to sum up all of the values that are in here, effectively what I need to do is I need to say, add this number to the sum of those numbers. Add this number to the sum of those numbers. I don't know what the answer to this is, but recursion will mean that it will say add this number to the sum of these numbers. And recursion will say add this number to the sum of these numbers, which will say add this number to the sum of these numbers, which will say add this number to the sum of these numbers, which will say add this number to the sum of these numbers, which will say add this number to the sum of nothing else. And the sum of nothing else is 0, we already know that, So when you add 50 to that, you get 50. And now we can get our answers back because the previous one said add 30 to whatever you got from this, and that's going to be 80. And the previous one to that said add 20 to whatever you get from that, which is 100. And the previous one to that said add 8 to whatever you get from that, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's how the recursion is going to work. I'm going to take whatever's in this cell, and I'm going to add to it a recursive call for all of the rest of the array. All right, so back to my replit window, I'm going to take whatever's in the first cell, that's known as the array, at 0, and I'm going to add to it the rest of the array. All right, and eventually that's what I'm going to return. So that's the recursion part of it. The problem is I have to pass myself a smaller array. And how do we go about doing that? Well, in C#, there's a handy little function called array.copy, which allows you to make a copy of an array, and you can give it a subset of an array that you want to copy. So this is not really a recursion topic. This is now a how do you work with an array topic. And so what you can do here is I'm going to create another array. It's going to be an integer array again, and I'm going to call it subarray. And it's going to be a new integer array, and the size of it is going to be the original array's length minus 1, because it's going to be 1 smaller than whatever I was originally passed in. All right, now that I have that, I'm going to say array.copy. It takes a bunch of parameters. The first parameter is the array that you want to copy from, which in this case is the array. Second parameter is where you want to start copying in the original array, which is in cell 1, not cell 0, because I want to take cell 1. I'm trying to make this array from that array. So I'm starting on cell 1. The third parameter is the new array that you want it to copy into, which we're calling subarray. That's what I just created right here on the line before it. The fourth parameter is where you want to start the copy in the new array, which is cell 0. And the fifth parameter is where how many cells you want to copy, which again is going to be the array.length minus 1. Okay, so that's a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but the array copy basically takes in a bunch of parameters and it copies one array into another. So effectively, given this as the original the array, what it's going to do is it's going to produce a new subarray that contains those cells. And likewise in the next call, if that's the array, then it's going to produce a subarray, which is these cells. All right, so now that I've done that, I can pass subarray to my recursive call. All right, so we're going to run this and see what happens. While it's compiling, you should always do a quick smell check. What do you think is the correct answer? So 50 plus 30 is 80, plus 20 is 100, plus 8 is 108, 114, 117, 119. Yeah, okay, 119 is what I got back, and that looks like that seems correct. I'm getting what looks to be a warning, unreachable code detected on line 13. Yeah, so this return statement can never happen. Either this happened or this happened, but this is never going to happen. So I'm going to get rid of that because it was just there when I originally created the method. So that should get rid of that warning. All right, so that's how you go about solving a recursive problem. First off, figure out the base condition. Simplest possible circumstance. Then think about how you would make a recursive call and what you would pass in that recursive call that's getting you closer to the base condition. And then the final bit is just figuring out what math or what else are you trying to do. Maybe you're printing something out or whatever else each time you make a recursion. That's the last part that you're figuring out. So hopefully that helps this week, and you guys are now rock stars when it comes to recursion. I will see you guys next week. Have a good weekend.